Have you ever had a counselling or psychotherapy client who did not seem to show much, if any, sense of guiding and directing their own life? Or one who, despite apparent heroic efforts, was stuck in some significant way, unable to move forward? What about those fairly intact clients who come with an agonising loss of faith or purpose? Hi, I'm Richard Hill, and for the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be talking about a central concept in psychosynthesis, one which doesn't figure prominently in many other schools of psychology, and that concept is will. If you've not been trained specifically in psychosynthesis, you may not have had the opportunity to study presenting issues and symptoms using a lens of will. You may not be aware of how to do will work with clients who would benefit from it. In fact, it's possible that you may not have had much thought about will at all. So let's start with the basics. So I'll define will, I'll talk about its main characteristics as conceptualized by Roberto Assagioli, the founder of psychosynthesis psychology. In addition to the aspects of will, we'll look at the main qualities of it. Assagioli regarded will as being so important because he said it was the function closest to the self. Assagioli also understood that successful willers cannot merely decide on an intention to pursue nor repeat mantra-like affirmations that they have achieved their goals if they are taking no other action. Rather, there are 6 definite stages of the will act that occur prior to a goal manifesting. I'll take you through those by introducing you to Wills, who attempts to get a career goal. If you're interested in further study of will, I recommend the Psychosynthesis series of professional development courses from the Mental Health Academy. You will see the website below. Click into that. The course Principles of Psychosynthesis provides an overview of this psychology, whilst understanding will and working with will in the therapy room provide a more specific examination of how will works, including how it shows up in client issues. So for now, let us wallow a little in will. Rather than strictly define will, let's look at what will is and, well, what it's not. It's been said that choosing is the action at the back of which is the will. As we attempt to grapple with what will is, let's start with what it's not. Will is not just desire energy. Will is not someone acting out their feelings experience. Will is not necessarily top dog energy, nor is it synonymous with control. Will is not just the Victorian notion of steamrolling over obstacles and objections, and will is not just about repressing that which is unwanted. We'll talk about what will is in a moment, but first it's important to appreciate that will is always present, somewhere, somehow in the system. It is the central task of psychosynthesis practitioners to find out where it is in clients' lives and how it is manifesting. Truly, the business card of a psychosynthesis guide could read, John Bloggs, counsellor, I track will. At a personal level, will can be viewed as an essential impulse towards wholeness. It's that drive within us which coordinates the often conflicting parts of our personalities into self-expression, functioning as a sense of direction and guiding us towards personal integration. At a deeper level, we begin to express our own unique gifts in the world as we align with guidance from transpersonal will, the will of self. Sadly, it's often only in the absence of this life direction that we realize how lost and meaningless our lives can become. The existential crisis that is generated does not come from our neuroses and cannot so much be fixed by changing jobs, houses, or lovers. Rather, such crises derive from the call of the self yearning to connect more and deeply within us. The vehicles it must use to do so are those of consciousness, as awareness and will. We can make that journey smoother for ourselves and our clients with a deeper understanding of will and how it works. Psychology wrote about aspects and the qualities of will, and also about the stages of a willed act. He considered the aspects of will a primary notion. So let's look at those first. When you think about will, what thoughts spring up in your mind? Is it a sense of the willpower you must exercise in order to resist eating that goodie not on your diet menu? Or possibly your sense of your own capacity to keep going when you're utterly exhausted? Well, certainly that aspect, strong will, is one part of our will. But far from the whole deal, we must also learn how to use the aspects of skillful will and good will. These three aspects each help a person to direct will in different ways. Strong will. When we talk of using our will, it's often this basic aspect of strong will we're talking about. It's the only one of the three equally important aspects. It's only one of three, yet it may be the one that comes to our attention first. Psychology spoke of the three stages of will development. First, recognizing that will exists. Second, having a will. And finally, being a will, or rather acknowledging that one is a willing self. Our tasks as developing beings is to see that the will is strong enough for all the many tasks we apply it to in all the areas of our lives. The strong will is that aspect which makes sure that a willed act contains enough intensity, fire or energy to carry out its purpose. Strong will, without good will, or exercised clumsily without skillful will, can, however, be ineffective or even harmful to self and others. Skillful will. You may have heard the saying that when imagination and willpower are in competition with one another, imagination wins every time. Some writers have further stated that environment is also stronger than willpower. Psychology recognized these truths when he asserted that will may be overpowered if it puts itself into direct opposition to other psychological forces. If we conceive of will in a narrow way, as merely strong will, we may do just that, ending up using our will in a manner which is clumsy at best and possibly even harmful. In order to avoid inner conflict, stress, reduced effectiveness, and potentially adverse reactions between people, another aspect needed is that of skillful will. With skillful will, we have the ability to develop that strategy which is most effective and which entails the greatest economy of effort, rather than the strategy that is most direct or obvious. An example could be the manager who approaches the employee without any social nicety, brusquely orders that staff member to do a particular task. Well, let's say that employee doesn't comply immediately. The manager directs him again, and even more strongly. Knowing that his job is at risk if he doesn't obey, the employee eventually complies, but because he's been treated in such a manner, generates resentment and the secret wish for revenge, or at least the reclaiming of his power and his dignity. The manager has been able to exert his strong will, backed up by organisational authority, to force the task to be done, but at great interpersonal and possibly organisational cost. Now, if, however, the manager were to approach the same employee with some courtesy and respect, explaining the situation that requires him to do this emergency task, and stressing how much it would be appreciated by the organisation if the employee, uniquely suited for the task, could undertake it, well, I think the employee is likely to respond with considerably greater willingness and perhaps even some enthusiasm. In this second case, the manager has not only exerted strong will, but he's rather applied some skillful will. He showed a far greater knowledge of the interpersonal relating, and he's probably used a lot less energy, and he's almost certainly is bound to feel better after the interaction. This is skillful will. Clearly, we use our will best not as a source of direct power or force, but as that function which can stimulate, regulate, and direct all of the other functions and forces of our being so that they lead to the goal. Even using strong and skillful will, however, people may come up short of their goals if they do not observe the aspects of goodwill. Goodwill. We've been discussing strong and skillful will, as if the individual exerting his or her will were living in a vacuum. Of course, that's not the case, as people are in daily interactions with family members, friends, co-workers, and their communities. However strong and skillful a person may otherwise be, their goals are generally defeated if they don't take into account the crucial factor of relationships. The amount of wasted effort, time, money, and other resources because of conflict at levels from interpersonal to international, well, it's incalculable. Coming to a place of right relating, says Assagioli, is a question of willing. Goodwill, that is. In order to act with goodwill, a person must do more than be strong and skillful. He or she has the additional task of choosing goals which promote the common good. To do this, a person must avoid choices springing solely from self-centeredness or lack of understanding of others. Rather, with an aim of acting with goodwill, a person may stop judging or criticizing others. A person with goodwill behaves in a manner pervaded by compassion, fellowship, solidarity. Yet even after we activate our personal will with strong, skillful, and goodwill, there is another level to be reckoned with on our journey to self, that of transpersonal will. Transpersonal will manifests, as the name suggests, in and beyond the person. This will, too, arises from the experience of felt needs. Maslow's hierarchy of personal needs is well known, and even people not involved in the helping profession can often cite the levels of need that human beings seek to fill, more or less in sequence, from those of survival through those of safety and security, belonging and esteem, to those of self-actualization. Less well known are an additional group of needs posed by Maslow, transpersonal or meta-needs. Paradoxically, people who satisfy all the needs in the hierarchy often enjoy great success and even fame and riches, but often begin to experience boredom, emptiness, and meaninglessness. This state leads to a search for that something other, that something more. Viktor Frankl described this as the existential vacuum. He saw it as engendering the opposite of Maslow's peak experience, a state Franklin called the abyss experience. Such a person, without realizing it, is seeking to connect with transpersonal will, an impossible quest without a crucial sense of meaning and purpose. Grasping the above aspects of will is necessary, but insufficient to understand the psychosynthesis concept of will. Two people exercising a similar measure of skill, strong or good, look very different in the execution of similar-willed acts. The reason for the variation can be seen in another essential component of willing, the qualities of will. Assagioli claimed that study of will in action by those considered to be willers, people with amply manifest wills, would reveal 7 essential clusters of qualities. Now, these are characteristics which would be outstanding in great willers, but are undoubtedly present at least to some degree, in normal willers. He stressed that it was important to know the qualities thoroughly so that they could be evoked at will and in the proper balance for the task at hand. Energy. Energy is the dynamism and intensity associated with strong will and needed to be used proportionately, balanced by other qualities. Being attuned to transpersonal will often means something happens without huge apparent effort, as the willer channels superconscious energies. Mastery. Mastery is a quality of discipline, wherein appropriate control guides construction, utilization of one's biological and psychological energies. Concentration. Concentration is a quality of one-pointedness of focus, in which the willer learns or directs attention towards worldly concerns, inwards towards intrapersonal processes, and upwards towards superconscious or transpersonal realms. Determination. Determination is a quality of decisiveness which must be finely balanced with judicious consideration. Of course, we can decide on something promptly if we do it impulsively, but our decision will lack depth of analysis and deliberation. Yet too much deliberation leads to delays in making decisions. Persistence. Persistence, related to both endurance and patience, can be seen in people who keep trying despite repeated failures. It includes those, such as super athletes, who put themselves to supreme physical tests for their sport, and those who will survival when surviving is against all odds. For example, Viktor Frankl in the World War II concentration camps. Initiative. Courage and daring are the qualities of initiative that can pervade acts of will when a person acknowledges that real security of any sort is an illusion, and also experiences a great sense of aliveness and clarity of thought in performing an act of daring initiative. Organization. This final will quality of organization was to us Agioli the most important, because it enables will to fulfill its specific functioning of organizing, coordinating and integrating. Through it, we can experience will as intelligent energy directed towards a definite aim, having a purpose. As you can see, there is much encapsulated in this one little word, will. We've identified the aspects of strong, skillful and good will, exercised at the level of personal will, and also the importance of opening up to transpersonal will. I've just noted the 7 qualities of will which can change the way an act of will looks and feels. Yet ultimately, on the journey to self-realization, an individual's personal will must not only be activated sufficiently to contain these aspects and qualities I've just named, but also enough to carry the person from intention through to completion of any endeavor. We look now at the stages of the willed act. An act of will contains 6 stages, which follow sequentially in realizing an act of will, whether or not we're conscious of going through them. The stages are purpose, deliberation, choice or decision, affirmation or command, planning and programming, and the direction of execution. So what's involved in each stage? As anyone who's ever owned a cherished necklace can ruefully attest, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if sufficient attention is not paid to ensuring the capacity of all the links, the entire chain might be lost. Thus, in declaring an intention, a willer must see to it that each link in the chain of actions leading to realization of the intention is carried out as practically and effectively as possible. However, we don't necessarily pay equal attention to each stage of the act of will. Some people regularly tend to experience more difficulty. They tend to experience more difficulty, at one stage than another. They find it hard to make a decision, for example, or also each will act arises in different circumstances, than other willed acts. Thus, in one case, the situation demands that much attention be paid to, say, defining process, whereas the other similar intention, the circumstances may dictate exquisite care at the planning and programming stage. So with that in mind, let's see what's involved with each stage of the act of will. We'll go through the stages as we follow the willing actions of William, or Wills, for short, who's trying to perform an act of will in regard to his career. Wills, a young doctor who had completed his basic medical training and acquired several years of experience, needed to decide how he wanted to shape his career. He was pulled in various directions, being enthralled with aspects of various branches of medicine. He realised that he would probably not be able to head off in a career direction that would satisfy him over the lifetime of his work if he didn't clarify what sort of a doctor he wanted to be. That is, what his purpose as a doctor was. Assagioli's first stage of willing deliberately lumped together the interrelated elements of purpose, aim, goal, valuation, motivation, and intention. Purpose is the will to reach a goal. The person would not generally hold an aim or goal if he or she had not evaluated it and found it to have value. Motivation arises when someone has a motive, which means literally something that is impelling them to move towards that goal. The direction of the movement is given by intention. In Will's case, reflection on his career aspirations led him to understand that while the whole career of medicine had value for him, he was particularly motivated by several things, and they seemed almost opposite. One motivation was that of watching people grow and develop into healthy beings over a long period of time. The other motivation was to help save people with acute and intense illnesses. He thus realised that because he valued both aspects of being a doctor, it would be unlikely to find them in the same specialty. He'd have to more precisely set his career goal by coming up with a clear intention. Wills formulated his aim as that of helping to increase the well-being of as many people as possible, with the further intention of stretching himself as a doctor to understand as much as possible about acute injury and illness. Decisions. Deliberation. Wills has reached the stage of deliberation. With his aim clear, Wills now arrived at the stage of deliberating. Part of him loved the idea of being in private practice as a general practitioner, being a stable force for healing in the community and developing a long-term helping relationship with the client, families who he cared for and managed. An equally strong part, however, loved the high adrenaline thrill of the emergency department, taking the quick and heroic actions that saved people's lives. As Willers, we inevitably confront the reality that we may never be able to pursue the endless array of possibilities that parade through our minds and lives. Thus, we must find a means of establishing which potentials we prefer to pursue and which to leave aside. The stage of deliberation can bring to light unconscious motives and also help the person deliberating to see the problem clearly in order to better access the possibility of achieving the goal. For Wills, deliberation meant consulting with doctors already practicing the branches of medicine he was thinking of entering. He talked with both general practitioners and with emergency medicine consultants. At one stage, he even got counselling about his best life direction. The counsellor, quite correctly, far from directing him into one field or the other, asked Wills to make contact, through perhaps some meditation, with his transpersonal self and open himself to guidance from intuitional and superconscious realms. Wills also joined a group of doctors who were at a similar decision point, engaging in collective deliberation with these as to the pros and the cons of the various choices. Regardless of what methods are used during the stage of deliberation, Assagioli believed that an individual should always take into account his or her own character tendencies, such as whether he or she tends to be impulsive, the majority of us, or indecisive, more of a minority. Both tendencies affect how a willer does the third stage of choice. Choice. The choice stage of a willed act tends to be straightforward and easy for those who fully engage the deliberation stage and come out of it with clear understandings about the options which can lead to fulfillment of the goal. Some people, however, lead agonising lives of chronic indecision. The fear of making a wrong choice conflicts between conscious and unconscious motives, unwillingness to assume responsibility or face consequences. They all take their toll on some individuals' willing processes. The painful reality a chooser confronts is that to choose one thing, we must discard another. Most of us do not like to have choices taken away, so a part of ourselves may strongly resist options being taken off the table. The default decision that often results, that is, decision not to decide, can create consequences more frustrating and opportunity denying than either of the potential choices. In Will's case, no decision would have meant no specialty and thus limited his career expansion. So as Will came to the stage of choosing, he realised that although he struggled to let go of either option, he may not need to do so on a permanent basis. If he pursued the emergency medicine option, he could do this for a number of years, and then if the fast pace of emergency medicine became too much for him later, he could relatively easily recertify himself as a general practitioner. And besides, he told himself, he really did love being able to see the instant results of someone going from sort of unconscious and barely breathing to a stable place of relatively greater well-being. Wills recognised the importance of having the means to follow through on the choice he was leaning towards, so he calculated before finally choosing how much the specialisation would cost him, both in terms of dollars and years of study. When all that stacked up, Wills chose to take the additional training towards emergency medical specialisation. Affirmation, command. Thus, having chosen, Will arrived at the Will stage of affirmation. Assagioli saw affirmations as being a pivotal stage of the process of willing, for it begins to orient the willer towards the achievement of the goal. Decisions without affirmation lack a dynamic, impelling power. By affirming one's choice, a willer expresses certainty through the coming together of two inner attitudes. Faith, which is not a religious quality to Assagioli, but an inner experience of confidence and conviction. And we can think of faith as an intuitive thing. So affirming a choice we have made involves faith in ourselves. That is, in psychosynthesis speak, faith that our transpersonal self will come through and help us achieve the goal. It's complemented by conviction, the mental phenomenon by which we arrive at the secure sense that we are moving forward properly. The certainty of faith and conviction together has the power to attract the realisation of the goal. Wills used a variety of techniques to affirm his choice. Words, images, and emotions all brought his goal into focus as if he had already achieved it. Wills often repeated to himself, especially when relaxed, the affirmation, "I am a competent emergency medicine consultant." As he did this, he saw himself attending to a seriously injured person with efficiency, mastery, and compassion. Simultaneously, Wills invoked the powerful positive emotions that he knew he would feel after helping a critically ill person to a place of stability. Wills was glad to do the inner work of affirmation towards achieving his goal, but he knew that there was outer work necessary as well. He needed to attend the stage of planning and programming. Wills realised that he wasn't across the finish line to his goal until he worked out how to fit the program into his life. He got a commitment of both financial and emotional support from his partner about the need for the extra study, and thus his general unavailability that the specialisation program would engender. He found out when he could begin the program and what the pace of it was, which would determine how much he could work during the course of it. Wills simultaneously worked out what he could give up from his current life in order to accommodate the study. He was wise to attend to all these aspects. Assagioli notes that some people proceed well through the stages of a willed act until they get to planning, where the goal spirals downward to failure because they have dreamed up a goal well in excess of their capacity to access resources to fulfill it. Other plans fail because people may conceive of a worthy goal and plan it reasonably well, but are not competent at some aspect of the programming, such as formulation of the broad plan or developing a pilot project. Whilst Wills was fairly confident that he had the financial, the academic and the personal resources to pursue the program, he knew he needed to have a sort of trifocal lens as he proceeded through it. One lens was keeping constantly in mind his overall goal of helping people with acute medical needs. Another lens was that of intermediate stages of his goal. For instance, what courses or learning experiences were coming up at each phase of the program, and what he needed to do to prepare for those. And the third lens kept him focused on his immediate duties. In Will's case, this last meant being aware of his weekly schedule and the papers and assignment which were due. Achieving a goal through high-caliber planning requires flexibility and wisdom, unflagging attention. It requires vigilance, patience, and persistence. These are all qualities of the will, which seem to confirm Assagioli's belief that planning plays an integral and integrating part of the process of willing. Quality planning leads well to the final stages of willing, the direction of execution. For Wills, the stage of direction of the execution began the first day he turned up in the chosen emergency department for his internship, which would accompany his working through of various online resources and be followed up by his sessions with a personal mentor chosen by the program's director. As Will got into his program, he reflected that his good work of proceeding through the stages of willing could all fall down now if he made any one of a few common errors. Mainly, he was aware that he could potentially misuse his will by not understanding the role it was meant to play in helping him achieve a goal. That is, he could mistakenly try to impose the power of his will directly on his psychological forces, meaning, intuition, thought, desire, sensation, emotion, and imagination. Alternatively, he could let his will direct those psychophysical functions. Having read a bit of Psychosynthesis, he chose the latter and reflected on how a wise use of will might help him to achieve his emergency medicine diploma. For one thing, he knew that there were many sensory impressions in the emergency department. He often felt flooded by the sights, sounds, and smells arising from human beings in strife there. He knew that he needed to recruit his will to help him focus on those sensations that would help him to help the patients. His will could help him integrate those perceptions that were most central to this task and assist him in letting go of the rest. It was similar with emotions. When he felt overwhelmed with either concern for someone or sheer frustration of not being able to help them more, his emotions tended to push for immediate release. Realizing that a doctor screaming in the emergency ward was probably not a good look, he vowed to train his will to initiate other means of ventilating, means which were more appropriate, such as during a counselling session or in the privacy of his home. Wills was also aware he couldn't strong-arm his intuition into delivering insights about his patients, so he resolved, through his will, to make daily time for the stillness sessions, which would keep clear the channel of communication along which intuitive impressions travel, allow him to be receptive to intuition. Wills knew he had a hard slog ahead of him, but he also understood how greatly he could be assisted by his will. It has, he concluded, a special place in the makeup of our psyche, so crucial to the accomplishment of any goal, yet so vulnerable to misuse if it is not allowed to act as the subtle but effective director, regulator that it's designed to be. In this talk, I've examined the chief concepts of will as formulated by Assagioli, the founder of Psychosynthesis. Psychosynthesis is unique among psychologies for acknowledging the central role of the will in the development of human beings to their fullest potential. Assagioli recognized three aspects of personal will: strong, skillful, and good, plus the importance of activating transpersonal will. Willed acts can vary in their manifestation according to 7 clusters of qualities with which the acts may be permeated or not. Acts of will pass through 6 stages en route from intention to realization, but people engaging in a given act of will do not generally need to pay equal attention to each stage. As a self headed towards self-realization, we are bound inextricably with will, the most intrinsic function of that self. Yet rather than being upset about the bond between our will and our self, we must celebrate it. For right use of will engenders a sense of freedom, mastery, and power, which is profoundly joyous. I hope you enjoyed this talk. Feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. Thank you.